All right, Keith. Manchester City, although they said they won their APT rules hearing, officially lost the Premier League vote on the APT rules. What are the likely next steps? What was the final ruling? Give us a bit of a summary of how this all went down.
Sure. Look, this is, as we all know, a very long, protracted, detailed, complex situation. And I was surprised on Friday morning. The vote happened really quickly in the Premier League meeting. I think the news had already broken by about 9:30 in the morning, so it must have been the very first thing on the agenda. And yes, it was 16 votes to 4 to really back up the Premier League position that the APT rules, the Associated Party Transaction rules, would be amended, and that they would then that would be the rules that would be stood by. It was considered a loss for Man City because they had actually lobbied to postpone that vote, and to have it supported so clearly by 16 clubs did actually surprise me as well. But nevertheless, it showed some degree of unity, which was pleasing. And so now we have those rules in place. They've been amended to take account of what the last hearing said. Although, interestingly, we're still to hear from the three judges who sat at the hearing as to what they believe will now be lawful going forward. So the Premier League did move ahead regardless. So we're now stuck with APT rules now in place that appear to be legal, and so the clubs can at least have some certainty and to act accordingly.
And when will we hear from those judges, and how much of an effect does that actually have on what's already been voted on?
Well, you'd hope that the Premier League has done its homework and that they have, their legal team have taken into account all the major findings. And so it should be a case of just those judges rubber stamping it and saying, yes, those were the changes we intended. It did not seem to be too complex in terms of what they ruled on. So let's hope that can be there now. Of course, one of the main things is that we're not going to have to look back retrospectively at some of these charges, which is one of the key points. But hopefully we can now move on from this, and then we get back into the main Man City 115 charges situation, which is still going on. But this was certainly the first skirmish in that whole battle.
And you talk about the retrospective, looking back on some of these charges. Are you talking about those kind of loan situations that people were talking about with Everton and Arsenal and some other clubs who would have been in all sorts of PSR trouble had they
Yeah,
done retrospective?
absolutely. That was the key point, and I think a lot of clubs would have supported it for that reason. But nevertheless, I mean, you could say it's a Man City win as well because they've released some of the wording in the associated party valuation methods that would allow some of these big sponsorships now to go through. So the clubs like Newcastle and Saudi and Man City would now have the chance to try and get these bigger sponsorship deals through because the wording has been relaxed. So hopefully there's winners on both sides and everybody can move on.
Well, there were some surprises on who was backing Man City and who was backing the Premier League in this. Nassef Sawiris revealed Aston Villa were actually backing Manchester City. Why would they take that stance? One of the four clubs, I believe, that was actually backing Manchester City.
Yeah, look, I followed that closely, and I read the statement that Mr. Soris put out, and I've got to say, look, it made sense in terms of wanting to try and create a unified group, and that everybody should be trying to vote, if possible, unanimously on things, which is how it used to be in the Premier League in many areas. And I got that point, and he said, look, we should wait until those judgments and any indications from the judges panel come out. But nevertheless, it would appear that perhaps Man City had been a little bit too aggressive, and some of the clubs had decided that no, enough was enough, and we're not going to give in to a potentially illegal bully, is what some people would have perceived it as, and the threats that City were making. So a bit of a stand was made. Now, also for Villa, what's interesting, and as I mentioned before, whenever these sort of Premier League votes happen, it may not ever be what it seems to be on the surface. And what was interesting was there was some journalistic comment about how Mr. Soris has moved the headquarters of his company to Abu Dhabi. And so he may well be forming some sort of allegiance and some sort of, some political friendships with the group in Abu Dhabi, the Man City owners. And they will obviously maybe have met and talked about these things. and they may have a view on things together now. So they've become closely aligned, which is not wrong. It's just a case of there are often reasons behind it that can be bigger than a particular vote. So something to take into account on that. So it's, as I say, it's never quite how it seems. There are always other factors of people owing other people a favour sometimes, or different things, or deciding to unify around different votes. So it's never as clear as it seems. It's the Premier League, and the soap opera is always deep in intrigue, believe me.
And Everton and Wolves changed sides. They originally seemed to be backing Manchester City, but now they changed sides to actually back the Premier League in this case. Obviously, the majority backs the Premier League, but why would these two clubs kind of change their stance?
I think Everton and Wolves were pretty much wanting not to go back in history and look retrospectively at things. That would have given them both particular issues. So I think that was pretty clear. And so, potentially now also with Everton coming in with a new owner, there could be another big sponsorship situation possibly that could be coming up. And they would also not want to be, restricted. So let's see how that pans out. But I think it was the retrospective issue that both those clubs moved sides, if you like.